It's my pleasure. My name is Dr. Olaf, I'm from Aspetar, and it's my pleasure to guide you through this session together with my colleague, Dr. Francois from IHF. And as you know, the topic is handball, and there's quite a few people in the audience who are not so sure what handball actually is and what the demands on the players are. So we're going to talk about injuries, we're going to talk about the load that players sustain during handball, but first of all we need to know what the demands in handball are, and this is what this first part of the session will be about. So I'm very happy to introduce to you the first speaker who's going to get you into that topic. And so you just had an Olympic champion. I'm afraid I can't offer you an Olympic champion in that session, but I can offer you an Olympic athlete. So Karim Chamari, who is our first speaker, has actually represented his country at the Olympic Games in Barcelona, not in handball but in windsurfing. He's in Aspetar since 2013. He's a physiologist, and he's one of the rare persons who actually combine in-field team care, working with teams on the pitch, with research. So he has authored more than 100 papers, which is quite an achievement. At the same time, took care of many high-level teams. And he's going to talk today a little bit about the physical demands and player characteristics in handball. So Karim, please, on the stage, the floor is yours.
Thank you, merci. Thank you, Dr. Schumacher.
Hello, everybody. As said Dr. Schumacher, I'm going to talk about gain demands and anthropometry. But for this, I have an information from you. My body dimensions are quite small, less than 1 meter and 80 and less than 75 kilos. If you were a handball coach, would you choose me to play handball? Please. Keep the answer in your mind, and we're going to go to this a bit later. Here, let's have an overview about the determinants of handball performance. Of course, like all the sports, you have external influences. For the team, you have the tactics, the social interactions between players, the players' psychological and cognitive characteristics, the physical characteristics, coordination, strength, endurance, nutrition, of course, and we come again to the anthropometry, body constitution. If I show you, if it works, this one doesn't work anymore. Yes, now. If I show you this photo, which has been shot more than 40 years ago, I think you guess that this powerful and with high muscle volume player is, of course, our CMO, Dr. Popovic. He has been. Could you please give me something that works? Yes, he has been a golden medalist in München in '72. And now I come back to my question. If you had to choose between this guy there and me, I think that the answer is obvious. I'm sure that Aspetar staff will choose him, not only because they know sport, but also because he is their CMO. And other non-Aspetar staff, I have an advice for you: don't choose me. You would do a very great mistake. Why? Because there is a very nice study from an Iranian team, Gobari and colleagues, that analyzed the last World Championships that were held in Spain 2 years ago. And they report that, indeed, the body stature of handball players is quite impressive. Now we don't speak anymore about humans, we speak about giants. You know, there were 400 players, ages 27 years old, and their body dimensions were 1 meter 90 as an average, 92 kilos, and BMI a bit over 25. And we have to mention that these dimensions constantly increased over the years, over the past 40 years. Handball players gained more or less 10 kilos and 10 centimeters. And here we can see that there were also body dimension differences between positions, with the back players being usually the tallest, the wings being the lightest and the smallest, and the pivot players being the heaviest and with a high BMI. And with this we can see on the screen that some pivot players have also not only a lot of muscle mass, but also some body fat that contributes to this body mass with which they fight. These World Championships characteristics are also confirming data from Michalsik and colleagues of local leagues in Denmark, for example. Let's see now the last World Championships results. When we split the 24 teams in 6 groups of 4 teams each, we see that the last 8 teams were lightest and shortest than the 8 first teams. So there's definitely an impact of body anthropometry on handball performance. Now let's come to the physical demands. Today I'm going to rely on 2 recent studies performed by Danish researchers, with Lars Michalsik being the first author, and we are lucky that he's attending today. These 2 interesting studies did gather data of 6 years of Danish league. They are regarding 62 tournaments, and 82 players were followed by individual cameras during the whole game. The previous handball researchers have analyzed all the players. These researchers have analyzed the players who played long period of time, so more than 70% of the time of the game. What does tell the data? The data clearly shows that during 85% of the playing time, handball players are just doing nothing. They are just standing still, just walking, and a bit of jogging. So we could interpret this by saying that as handball is just watching, there's no risk of injury, there's no need of medical staff, so the conference is over and we can go for a nice weekend. But more seriously, if we look at the remaining 15% of what they're doing, here we discover what is handball. We see that for the locomotive characteristics, during the 15% remaining of the game, they just do fast running, sprinting, backwards running, and a lot of sideways running, with more than 600 meters of sideways running. These players, the 82 players, played during an average of 53 minutes, and they covered a total distance of 3 kilometers and 600 meters. And they did 1,400 changes of activity. It's like a football player with more than 1,000 changes of activity during a game. More interestingly, the fast running and the sprinting were of 280 meters. And it is interesting to note that during the second half, the high intensity running decreased of 16%. So there is some fatigue in handball. When it comes to positional differences, we see that wing players covered a higher total distance than pivots, and also they perform on more high intensity runnings than pivots and back players. Okay, now let's come to the technical characteristics. We can see here on the table that handball players do around 100 intensive actions. We see here 37 high intensity actions and around 70 duels. And I will leave the duels for my colleagues, Professor Jacques Priou, that came from France, that will develop on this. For the high intensity technical actions, we see that during the second half, there is also a decrease of these actions with lower lactate, showing that the fatigue is here in handball. These actions were offensive breakthroughs, fast breaks, shots, and I will leave to Jacques blockings, clasping, and hard tackles. Here also there are positional differences, with wing players doing more high intensity runs than pivots, and pivots doing more duels. Now let's have a look at the game dynamics. This figure shows in bars the distance covered over 5 minutes periods, during the first half in black and second half in gray. We obviously see that the handball game starts at a high pace with a higher distance covered during the 10 first minutes. And then during the first half, distance decreases and is significantly lower at the end of the game. So fatigue comes up. When we see the lines and the dots, they represent the relative intensity measured through heart rate measurements. And we see that the 21st minutes of the first half are performed at a high pace, around 80% of VO2 max. And of course, as I told you, fatigue comes and this intensity decreases at the end of the first half. Quite interestingly, the first minutes of the second half are performed at a low intensity. So after 15 minutes of break, perhaps there should be a real warm-up of something to improve this start of second half. Anyway, the intensity progressively increases, but staying significantly lower than the first half. And quite interestingly, it seems that handball players are just thinking about the end of the game, and they increase again their intensity at the end of the game to reach the same intensity as the last minutes of first half. So the message here is that fatigue accompanies handball efforts. Here, just to confirm that average intensity of handball is a bit over 70% of VO2 max, and here there's no positional differences. There are no positional differences. The positional differences don't come in the average intensity, but they come in the activity they do. As we said, wings doing more distance and pivots fighting more. We come to the end of the presentation. Now here's some data from the European Handball Federation with the players and the coaches. They seem to optimize this rule of unlimited changes. And we see that during the last 2012 European Championships, less than 40% of the players played more than half of the game. And rare players played more than 70% of the games, without only 14%. So the remaining of the players, they just play few minutes to less than half of the game. And this is a way to overcome fatigue. To conclude, we can say that team handball is a physically demanding intermittent sport with clear differences in positional roles. It seems that body anthropometry has an important role to play. The level of endurance is at a moderate to high intensity intermittent endurance, with fatigue coming from the repeated high intensity actions. And lastly, we should stress the importance of individualization. The fitness, the physical training should be individualized in a basis of the different positions. Lastly, I would like to thank my colleagues that helped me to work on these slides. Could you please press on the okay, it's okay. I would like to mention Dr. Souhail Hermessi from Tunisia and Lars Michalsik from Denmark. These two colleagues helped me, sending me a lot of material, and we are lucky to have Dr. Michalsik. Could you stand up for 2 seconds, please? Thank you very much. Dr. Michalsik has been a fitness coach of quite successful female handball players, that just won World Championships and Olympic Championships. Thank you very much for your attention.